Hey everyone, welcome to our second video on day 3 of our virtual GDC. Thank you for joining us. I am Shane. I'm going to be your host for this particular session. This session is going to be covering how to become your own publisher with AccelByte Storefront and a launcher. And just because that means publisher doesn't mean that if you're a small developer that this might not be of interest to you. You might want to sell your games directly without using someone like Steam or Epic or Sony PlayStation or Xbox. You can have your own storefront. You can sell directly from your website pretty easily with the tools we have to offer. But I want to cover what AccelByte is in general. So I guess the first question is, who or what is AccelByte? So AccelByte is a game backend platform. It's got team members from places like Epic, EA, Microsoft, GameSparks, Ubisoft, and more. So when it comes to the online functionality side of things, we have a really good kind of background and a really good set of skills and experience with dealing with this kind of stuff as well. So it's a pretty good team to have in your corner. We are a one-stop shop for microservices, and what that means is like the entire AccelByte platform or backend is capable of doing everything your game would ever need to do if you have an online game with any sort of online functionality. That covers user accounts, user management, e-commerce, social, matchmaking, player profiles, statistics and cloud saves, telemetry and analytics, server orchestration, crash reporters, and like tons more. So out of the box, those are the things we provide, and you can just take them and use them right away, and it's no issue. You can just have user login running within 30 minutes, as I showed off earlier on. But of course, we also, due to our experience in this field, we also believe and know that there is no one-fits-all solution for this kind of stuff. A lot of places will advertise that, just use our services and your game is good to go. But we know for a fact that every game is unique, and we've never had a customer who hasn't needed to do something to make their game unique and attractive to players and something that people haven't seen before. So if for whatever reason you need to customize user accounts, we're going to help you with that. You might want to have a particular e-commerce flow of how a user buys an item and how those items are displayed to users. We can help you with that too. If you have a specific way of how matchmaking is going to work or player profiles, we're going to talk to you. We're going to hopefully work with you through your game design doc to make sure that we fully understand exactly what it is you're trying to deliver, and we're going to be the ones who change for you rather than you changing how your game design works to make our stuff work for you. So in that regard, we are completely open to having that conversation with you guys to make sure that you have the best final product in the end. If you are successful, we are successful too. So it's a relationship we want to build with you, our customer. So on that note, I'm going to quickly describe some other features that AccelByte has that other third-party backend providers don't. And one of them is what we call single tenant hosting. So if you use another third-party provider, you are potentially being hosted, your backend services are being hosted on a cluster of servers that maybe host 2 games, they maybe host 200 games. It's never really very clear exactly what server status you're on looks like. However, with AccelByte, we provide single tenant hosting, and again, what that means is you have your game on your server, and it's your game only. There's no chance of data collision. There's no chance of, let's say, if you're hosted for some reason on the same server that Doom is being hosted on this Friday, if your game is live and Doom goes live, the chances are so many people are going to play Doom all at once that it may have a negative impact on the server. If you're on a multi-tenant hosting solution, when that happens, well then your game is impacted by that. You might have it might be slower for you to log in. You might have people trying to save data and those requests timing out because the other game is so popular. So single tenancy avoids all that. It's a single backend for your brand, for your games, and generally it's just a lot safer that way. It's safer because you own your data. There's no pool of data that's being shared on the server. It's not like all the databases are being shared together and we've just kind of sliced off a section for your game. It is a self-contained, secure database, and what you do with that data is up to you. AccelByte does not market that data. It does not sell that data. We don't look at that data. It is yours to do with what you please. So that's just a couple of another interesting points that AccelByte does. And finally, just so it's super clear on exactly how AccelByte works, all of our services that I've mentioned that you've seen pop up on the screen here, most of them use REST API for authentication, for doing e-commerce, for uploading and downloading cloud saves. And the section for social user interaction, like friends, chat, or matchmaking, that's all using WebSockets. So it's kind of a versatile set of tools where we're kind of half going with one solution for one thing, and then for places where you need asynchronous messaging for friend invites or chat messages, we're using WebSockets to kind of enable that. And of course, you can modify the WebSockets to have custom payloads of data if you need to do some sort of asynchronous gameplay. But that's something that we would help you customize anyway. And that's something you're going to hear me say an absolute ton during this talk is what we have built, and what we're going to show you now in just a second is what we kind of envision as the best way for us to demo our product. This is not the exact product that you receive when you sign up with us. We will fully customize whatever needs to be customized. So keep that in mind as I click through some of the stuff we're going to see today. So to start off with how to become your own publisher, it's an important thing for that is for players to have somewhere to go to buy your games. And it's specifically somewhere, players can go to Steam or they can go to Epic, and when they purchase your game, you have to give a percentage cut to those providers for however much it is. It's different depending on the platform and depending on what game engine you use. But if you have your own player portal with a storefront, you're in control of the rates effectively. The only percentage cut you have to do is like with whoever your payment provider is. So PayPal might take a 5% cut, Xsolla might take a 5% cut. Don't quote me on those percentages, but it's a much higher or much lower percentage and much higher percentage of profit for you. So on our player profile or player portal here, it's a full experience for, if you clicked on the Steam store, this is what this is. It's a landing page for your players to manage their account, see what items are for sale, and receive news information and get support for their particular accounts. In our demo environment here, we have a storefront that's built on top of a contentful blog. We have worked with customers in the past to use different CMS systems. So again, this is not something that you buy and you have to use. We've had a customer who had a pre-existing website and built in WordPress, and the only thing that changed was their entire layout was exactly the same, except we put a login button up the top and we put a storefront button on the other side as well, and everything else stayed the exact same. So this is something we can work with you to completely customize and have the perfect kind of flow that you feel is best for your brand and your users. Everything you see here, all of the games that are for sale on our demo store are all driven by our e-commerce service. And I will show you in a few minutes how we actually customize one of these games. But this storefront is where your users will actually click in and see the information about your game. You have a hero image up here, screenshots for how your game plays. You can get information about the game, an overview, the system requirements, everything you'd expect from a AAA storefront, if you will. And this is what you will be using to sell your games to your customers. And then at the bottom here, we can actually show the individual in-game items that are available for this game. But that's something I will cover in a different talk, if we don't get to it in this one on time. As I mentioned before, we also have Contentful integrated in this particular demo, and this is where we're generating these blog posts. And it's just another way to engage your users and kind of build that direct relationship with your users that really builds the fan base to be very loyal and very they will come to you for their source of news first, and they'll come to you to buy your games from you first before thinking of going somewhere else. Because I think a lot of gamers, PC gamers, console gamers, they are aware that if they can get the game from the publisher or the developer, they know that the developer gets a higher cut. Some of them do anyway, not all, but that's where your biggest fans really come into play with this kind of stuff. We have support built in, and we're actually doing an integration for our support. So the integration you're seeing here is where we have this integrated with Zendesk. So all of the frequently asked questions you see here and our contact support button, this is all pulling from Zendesk APIs that we've integrated with. And that's where these frequently asked question articles are being generated from. So I can click through these and get the optimal user performance. I can click contact or support, and we get a nice message here or message box that we can ask questions about our account and attach files for bug logs or any of that kind of stuff. But this is something we would work with you to customize as well. You might already have an existing contract with a Freshdesk or one of the other desk providers that do all these support features as well. So something that we can do, and it's almost out of the box. It does require some customization. But importantly, managing the relationship with your user is the thing we need to do as a publisher. So for your user who's buying items, they can log into your site, and importantly as well, they can log in with other third-party accounts. I'll cover that in just a moment. But as a player, when I log in, nothing much changes here. I can still go and I can buy games and log in and do all that fun stuff, but I can go and manage my account. So our optimal pattern here is you can see the username, the email address, where they're based, the user ID. This is useful stuff for being able to do customer support by having that information surface to the player. The player can also pick avatars, or they can upload custom avatars. As a player, I can importantly see the games that I have entitled to my account. So I only have 4 here, but if I had more, I could click see all and I'd see the full list of my 100 plus games, let's say. I can see and manage which accounts I've linked with. So you can see this particular account I've linked to my personal Steam account. We also support Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, Google, Apple, Facebook. A lot of the kind of big names we already have support for. But if there is something in particular that you don't think we have, or you need for your game, like let's say, I'm not sure if we have QQ support. We have so many, but if you need a QQ support or login support, we can do that integration for you pretty easily. So just something to keep in mind. As a player, I can manage all my individual sessions. You see I have quite a few in here from a few hours ago to the one I just logged in with. And this is just helpful for your users, gives them the kind of sense of security and control over their account, that if they feel like something is weird, or someone may have hacked into their account, they can log out and go change their password very quickly. We also have just kind of individual pages for where users can see information about their account. So in our order history, I can click on any one of these and I can see the information about that particular order. I've granted all these to myself for free because I'm an administrator. But if you had used the credit card, that kind of payment information would be available on this page with the purchase ID and all that other useful stuff. I can add payment methods to my account. I do not have any added, unfortunately, for this particular demo, but we do support Xsolla, PayPal, Alipay, WXPay, and Adyen out of the box, and we can add more, of course. Again, as I mentioned, you generally have you might have an existing contract in place with a third-party payment provider, or you might just want to use someone like Stripe yourself. That's just your preferred choice. That's something we can customize and build in for you as well. We have a code redemption feature. So, you have your own storefront, and that's awesome, but you may want to sell your game on Humble Bundle or Good Old Games, or GOG, I believe they're called now. So what you can actually do is you can generate codes for the individual games and items on your store, and you can export them as CSV files, and you could give them to one of those other storefronts, or you could use those codes and like build a system that if people follow and retweet your account, you could automatically send them a code in a DM. Lots of really cool, useful stuff like that. And it's important to note, and a question we get asked a lot is, do we support selling Steam codes from our own personal store? And the answer is yes, of course. So you could have a player go buy Light Fantastic here, and when they purchase the game from your store, not only does that entitlement get added to their account so they can play it from your launcher, but you could also email the customer a Steam key and they can activate that on their account and play it there if that's their choice. We are working on something called Buy Once, Play Anywhere, which is the method of that if you buy a game on Steam, it will automatically enable it for your account on the developer launcher. Something we're still kind of working out and trying to figure out what the best way of doing that is. So please email us if you're interested in it, or subscribe to our newsletter, and I'm sure you'll hear something good about that in the coming months. So other than codes, again, we kind of covered some of the stuff like sessions, but we have push notifications, or rather they're asynchronous notifications from the cloud. So you might get a notification that someone has sent you a friend request, or a particular game has been updated, or there's a sale on, that kind of thing. And then very importantly, and this is something I covered in a live demo yesterday, is the legal terms of service management tool. It's a bit of a mouthful, but what this enables you to do, and it's something that's often overlooked by third-party backend providers, is the ability to upload, edit, and manage the live terms of service agreements that players have accepted. And in the world of GDPR, this is very important, as well as also just covering yourselves from liability of whatever the user may do with their account. You can also include stuff like don't sell your account in this. And what this lets you do is it tracks individually which terms of service version each individual player has signed. So you might have a player who hasn't played your game in 2 years. They signed the March 2018 terms of service, and then 2 years later they might try and do something that is now against your terms of service but wasn't back then. And you can just kind of keep an eye on that stuff when those weird edge cases come up. And that's what this tool is designed to help you with. And that's something if I have time in this demo, I will click into, obviously. And if not, we did a demo yesterday, and we'll probably be doing one on Friday that covers this particular topic again. And then I mentioned GDPR. We, of course, are fully GDPR compliant. We have an individual service that deals with all GDPR requests within our system. So what happens is, as a player, I want to make a GDPR data request. So I type my password in here, and then all of the services that AccelByte has, including the custom ones we build for you, our GDPR service crawls through all of those services for that user ID, and it will pull anything that has personally identifiable information and store them out as JSON files, zip them up, and provide a download for your users to click here and get that data, which means you're fully compliant with the ability to provide data when a user makes that request. Similarly, with account deletion, this is where we handle delete all my personally identifiable information. So a user may not want to use your stuff anymore. They may feel like there's some privacy concerns. And under GDPR, we have to be compliant. If a user requests that we remove their information, that we remove. So very similar to the personal data request, this will search through all of the individual AccelByte services, find that particular user, find the personally identifiable information, and scrub that PII from those documents and remove the user's ability to log in again. And the reason we don't delete anything is because if we started deleting files on users, you may have a report to generate for how many sales you had, and suddenly there'd be chunks of data missing. So we keep the report, we just nullify any particularly sensitive information about that user, and that covers us in the case of GDPR. There is also the California Consumer Protection Act. We don't have 100% compliance there. We're still working on it, but it's something that we're going to have very soon, and it'll be available for everybody as part of our GDPR compliant service. So for our users, that's kind of everything you can do on the user side of things. You can also have the users purchase currency packs as well as other items. That's something we can jump into in our admin portal. But right now, as a publisher, we've kind of ticked the box of we have a storefront, we can sell games, we can deliver news to our players, we can support our players, they can help themselves in supporting their own account as functionality. But one thing I haven't covered just yet is our launcher. So generally, if you're selling your games to your users, you want to be able to provide those games to them through a launcher, or you'd be integrating some sort of DRM. But by having a launcher, you can ensure that that player who's using it is logged in and that they have the correct entitlement to use that particular game. So this application here is our launcher. It is an Electron.js app that's wrapped around kind of some of our website, so some of what you see on the storefront, and then it's also got some unique functionality that I'll show you now once I log in. I log in as myself, type in my incredibly secure password. This is my account in the AccelByte launcher. So we get our notifications pushed through there. It's loading our library. You can see that I own a few games that we have in my profile on the website. I can play my games, I can verify the installation, check for updates, and uninstall them. All things you'd expect from a modern launcher. But we also have our store integrated here, and this is where we're pulling information directly from the website. We have the same thing for news and support. But where we have some more unique features is we have the notifications built right in. It says no data found. It should say no new notifications. We also have the ability to chat to our friends and add our friends. So I unfortunately have no friends in my friends list, but I can see outgoing friends requests. I can say, oh no, I've already talked to Afif, I don't want him there. Or I could go, oh no, I've accidentally removed Afif, so let's go find him again. And we say, look for Afif. Scans through the user database, and we have a lot of test users here, so I'm going to put Afif Unity test 1, looks like the right one, and a friend request is sent. And then we can manage our chat back and forth between our players that way. But other than that, it's pretty much what you'd expect from a launcher. But that said, if you do need to customize it, that's something, again, we are completely open to. You could just rebrand it and send it out and it looks the way it does, or you could completely kind of restructure how everything is supposed to look and still retain that functionality. And if you wanted to add in extra functionality like a server browser or voice chat, that's something we could help you do. So that's it for the launcher. We'll probably come back to this in a few minutes when I'm just demonstrating the build capabilities of the build management capabilities of our backend. But for now, we're going to log out of my account. We're going to log into our admin account, and I'll show off some of the admin panel features. So we log in, and so we're logged in as the admin on our player portal. But if we type our very secret URL up here, we are now on the admin dashboard, and I will click on our top level namespace here. So namespaces, I've covered this a couple of times this week as well, so find those videos if you can, but really quick. A namespace is a game configuration. So if you're familiar with GameSparks or PlayFab, what you can do is you create a game and you have a single game container, single game configuration. If you make a second game, it's very difficult to share information between those games. You might not know that game player or player of game B has also played player of game A without doing another very in-depth custom integration. But with AccelByte, we deploy your backend service, and it's like having your own multi-game container. So this namespace here, AccelByte, is our top level or our publisher namespace, and we can kind of configure stores and permissions and all sorts of stuff here at this top level namespace. Or we could jump down into like the game we developed earlier on our previous stream, and you can kind of change, you can override some of that or create new rules for that particular game namespace below the publisher namespace. You could do things that way. You can also have, like, if you wanted to have instead of having to deploy 4 or 5 different servers for QA, dev, test, and staging, you could have different namespaces configured that way so that your users are separate and their progress doesn't carry over for when you're going through certification and processes like that. But generally, it's just you have a top level publisher namespace or developer namespace, and then you have individual game configuration namespaces below that. And everything we're going to do today is in our publisher level namespace. So as a publisher or a small developer who's selling your own stuff on your website, you want to be able to manage your users. So if I type in my username there, we can see I have quite a few accounts. I want to pull up the user account that I saw earlier on. And then this is what the customer service representative or whoever is in charge of helping customers or managing customers will see. Also very useful for development purposes to see exactly how the account is structured and what information you can pull down from it. So we can see all the same information that the player did. We do have a few extra bits of functionality here. You can disable this account. You can make a personal data request on behalf of these users as well as a deletion request. You can see user activity, and you can get a bit more information about that. If you click in there, you can actually see what the client they are using is, the client ID they've registered with, and if we have a known device ID, you can track all that information about a user that a user cannot see themselves. You can also see all the recent purchases that this user has made or tried to make. And this is a good distinction here because as a player on the player portal, I can't see any purchases I haven't had fulfilled. Or there might be one that's open and pending payment. But if we have any failed payments or closed payments, as a developer or customer service representative, you can come in here and you can try and diagnose what the issue was with this particular order. And you can see in this case, this order was unpaid, so we never fulfilled it. So go back to the main top level user here. We can also see what the user has in their wallet, and because we have admin privileges, we can credit or debit this particular user. I like this particular user, so I'm going to give them some credits. And I'm going to say it was given for other reasons, and cool guy. So we credit that user, and he now has 100 extra credits in his particular account. We can, of course, debit if we need to, or view the history of who gave this player credits, and more importantly, why. And that is there to kind of prevent misuse of this particular system. There have, of course, been stories in the past from online games where someone who works at a company might be giving their friends some extra items or credits or access to things earlier that they shouldn't be doing. So by having that comment box there, it's just kind of keeping the checks and balances of who's changing what and why. And another feature that is quite often overlooked by these services is the ability to ban players. And not only can we ban players, but we can ban players from individual features of our backend. So if a particular user is abusive, I can ban this user for harassment or hateful conduct or whatever the reason is. I can ban them from chatting. But they can still read messages. I can ban the user from chatting altogether. They can't read or send. I could ban them from trading or making purchases, or I can ban them from just logging in altogether. And that's like a really serious one. But the fact that you can kind of pick and choose or really get into the granular fine control of how you ban your players is quite important for those trouble users that you may have. Um, and that's kind of it for the stuff we have out of the box. And again, this is something we've built as a demo. So there are other features that we could do. You know, if you had a loot-based game and the players were equipping items to their character, you'd have a window here and it would have slots for shoulder armor, arms, legs, belt, all that kind of stuff. And you could view that on this particular player. You could even have such a thing where you could be equipping and unequipping things off a player. If there was a bug, for instance, where a player for some reason couldn't equip something in the client, you could try control it from here and try and diagnose the issue otherwise. We also have logs on the player, and these logs are kind of just tracking individual events that are happening to and from the server. Again, this is kind of just for demo purposes, but this is something we can expand upon and make much more useful for an actual live production. And it's something you might want to use for, can be useful in customer service, or more specifically, a customer service representative has raised an issue, and a developer can then look at the logs and see exactly what the server sent and what the server received, and try and diagnose the issue from that perspective if the game client isn't cooperative in providing that information. We can also track the privacy record that the player could see as well. And then finally, we have the ability to see what game sessions this user is in actively by using our dedicated server manager. So that's something I will try and duck into in a second. And that's kind of it for how you manage your individual users. You can, of course, go in and manage information on a wider scale. So with our GDPR requests, I think if we go back to Friday last week, we can see that Vincent, my coworker, has made a GDPR request and it was completed. If this was still in progress, we could cancel that on behalf of Vincent. But this is just a useful tool for the legal team, or for someone to be able to track that, hey, this actually did work and it didn't fail, and we are still compliant in that. The same goes for deletion requests. I think if we go back to Saturday or Friday, we might find one somewhere where someone has deleted their account. So furthermore, as a publisher or developer, you want to be able to manage the GDPR settings. So in some cases, GDPR requires that players be over a certain age, or the age restriction might be set to that. So you don't want to be letting anyone in who says they're underage. So we can enable or disable the age restriction. We can set the particular age globally for what the age restriction is, but then we can also, and very conveniently, set it per country. So, some things in the United States may require that anyone above 21 be playing the game, but the rules here in Ireland might be a bit more lax. So you could say anyone who's 16 or older can be allowed in. So that's just there again to cover you legally for any issues that may arise this particular this particular GDPR stuff. And then finally, on the GDPR, we have the ability to email what we would consider admins. So if someone makes a request and it fails for some reason, or you can actually fine tune how you want these to be emailed out. If it's successful, you could do it too. But it's also very useful for if you're using AccelByte for, let's say, login, launcher, commerce, and friends, but you're using a third-party provider for something like social, or rather matchmaking and dedicated server managers. That third-party service might not have the best GDPR compliance and tools. They might not have an automated endpoint that you can hit, and then it will automatically delete that particular user's information. So if someone triggers a GDPR request, you could, of course, send an email to this particular person, and then they go and check that that process has been kicked off in the other third-party services as well. So quite a lot of good GDPR support. We are fully compliant, and we work to stay up to date on all of these things, including the California Consumer Protection Act and the newer ones as they crop up as well. So we jump onto our store management side of things. So this is the store you saw on both our launcher and our player portal. So if we load our store here, and while that's loading, we can actually jump in here and view how the store is configured. So our store works in two ways. We have both categories and items, and we use the same call to generate and render the store regardless of what kind of item it is. We just specify, show me all the games, show me all the coins, show me all the items. So on our store here, you would see our games. I click on bundles, we're asking for the bundles only. I click on currency up here, we're asking just for the coins. And that might take a second to load. So that's how we generate the store pages themselves. The items, on the other hand, are a bit more detailed. You can see all of our coin packs here, but if I type in, let's say, Voyage for the game, we can open this. And on our store, if we click on Voyage to Sriaya, we can see all of the, all of the screenshots and information. Oh, my cursor. So all of the information about this game is stored in this particular item. You can see the title, you can see the short description, which images we've uploaded to display in the store, the information about the product, which we haven't configured yet, but you can see the system requirements, and all that's what's used to generate this particular page here. And you'll see there we have game store. So in that game store, we have items displayed underneath as well as available in the client. So we can click on that as well. So if we go back and say, I believe one of them was called a modern ship. So the modern Sriaya ship, we click in here and we can see, lots of information about the item, specifically the category that it's in, item donating the fact that it's part of the game, and you'll see it below here. When it was created, if it's active, the namespace it applies to. So in this case, this is tied to our publisher level one. If we only wanted the item to be purchasable from within the game, we could set it to that particular namespace. We can assign things like SKU numbers, store IDs, and limit how many times a player can purchase this overall, or how many we can purchase per account. So it's pretty flexible. We also have control over the pricing, and we can even set the pricing per region. So if I go back to our stores list, that store we were just looking at is our actual live published store. So we can't make any changes to that because we don't want to be doing like kind of test data in our live environment. But what we can do is we can jump down here to our draft stores, and we can see June has made a store. And if we jump into view, it has the same categories, but we have different items as well as the ones we could see already. If I jump into Voyage again, spelled it, YAG. We can click in here and view, and now we can actually edit all of these fields. So if I go down to pricing, I can actually add a new price, and I can say, well, in Indonesia, it's going to cost something different, and we're going to tie it to this particular namespace, which I'll jump into in a second. And we can even say, okay, in Great British Pounds in Indonesia, so if I'm purchasing it through that currency, or I guess in Indonesia, it's the IDOR. This down the bottom. And we can click on that and we can say, well, it costs 500 IDOR. We can set a release date. We can give it a discount amount, a discount percentage, and we can even set when this discount applies for this particular item. If we add that there, we now have the price for Indonesia. Similarly, we can also add different languages support for the titles and the descriptions. So in Germany, it would be named whatever this is in German. Fortunately, don't speak the language, so I can't type it in here. But you can see in Chinese, we've given it the name in Chinese as well as the description. And if we go to our demo portal here, and we click on our store, click on Voyage. So if I change the language of the website to Chinese, you'll see the portal updates to reflect the particular user's chosen language. So very flexible and, of course, very useful if you're a developer or a publisher trying to sell games in multiple regions. So that kind of covers it for the store for the most part. You can do other things, like you can export the store as JSON, import it back in if you want to have a particular flow of how this information is created and edited. You can publish and clone stores, and you can also roll back from previous versions. So it's very useful for if you have like one of these could be named the St. Patrick's Day sale, and you can publish that live, and then once that's done, you can roll it back. Or we could customize this tool for you a little bit if you needed to have the ability to do that on the fly. We could have things like having a date in here for when this goes live, and it'll automatically manage itself. Generally, for our demo purposes, we find it's easier to manage that as a person ourselves. This is our code campaigns. So this is where we could generate codes that players could redeem. So I could say, okay, this is going to be our Paddy's Day sale, or codes rather, codes. So I'm going to give away some codes for free on Paddy's Day. We're a day late, unfortunately, but whatever. So we're going to set it to active. Each code can be redeemed once, and each code can be redeemed once per user. So it's cool that you can kind of change these if you wanted that. If you had a consumable item, you could have it so that a user could redeem it infinitely, or you can have it that one code can be used infinitely, but only once per player. And we're going to give it a type of item. And then we have our item generated here. We can add in items to this particular code, and we can say, okay, well, people are going to get a voyage, and they're going to get, I guess we'll give them the modern ship as well if we can find it in our drop-down. There it is. So they get a game and they get a bit of DLC. And then we can actually add codes to this. So we're going to say, I want 100 codes. Click add, and there's the items that we can now use. So if I were to, as a player, redeem any one of these, I could jump into the portal here or the launcher and redeem this particular item for what's available in the store there. And redeem it. It's in our profile page actually, so I won't do that right now, but that would be how that works. And then you can keep track of how these codes are redeemed and used through the lifetime of the codes that are generated. You can, of course, view orders and payment metadata, and the payment metadata is pretty useful for diagnosing issues because, again, this is what the payment provider is returning to AccelByte about this particular item. So, you might have someone purchase something, they might claim that their card has been charged, but you can now go in and see what state that purchase is in and what's gone wrong with that particular purchase. So, for instance, you can see here we have a refund. So some reason the user might have triggered a refund or they might have asked for one, and you can actually see, oh yes, that is refunded, but for some reason it might not have removed the item for their account, that kind of thing. We can also see entitlements for individual players. So if I type in my user account here, we can manage the entitlements for this particular player. We can view the history of that entitlement. We can also remove or disable, as well as grant items to an individual player. And similarly, we can do that the same with wallets here. It's just kind of a separate area for, depending on the different kind of users who are using your admin portal. We can have that fine granular control over that here. So before we jump out of store, I'll actually go into how we configure our payment configurations. And you can see on our platform, we have 2 configured here. So I won't jump into those because they might contain some sensitive data. But if we're configuring a payment configuration for our platform, we can configure it for all of our namespaces. So our publisher namespace and all of our games can accept PayPal, for instance. Or I might only be releasing this game in a specific territory, and that specific territory may not be very accustomed to using PayPal. So for GDC Demo 1, I could say, okay, well, you're not going to use Xsolla or Adyen or PayPal, but you are going to use Alipay. So that game is only being released in that region. We only use that region's popular payment provider. But we can go even further and say that only in China provide this particular payment provider. And you really have that kind of fine-tuned control again over exactly how your game is presented and how your game is available for people to purchase. So I'm not going to submit that, but that's generally roughly, I'm sure we could look in here, see this particular Xsolla is set up for Canada, merchant IDs, project IDs, all the information that's required to make this work is available. So very quickly, I'll also jump into our dashboard, and we're still kind of a bit of a work in progress here, but this is the dashboard that we've built for demo environment. We have other dashboards for other customers that have absolutely tons of information here, but this is the average revenue per paying customer, and this is actually tracking what individual customers are spending on your platform. And then we also have other information like daily active users, the billable MAU for this month, the total monthly active users, and then also we could generate dashboards for retention. We could generate dashboards for currently connected users, all that very useful stuff. So as a publisher, you could have all that information at hand, and we can customize this for you so that you may want to see exactly how many players you have registered in the United States and the rest of the world, and we could have pie charts and whatever you need for your dashboard. We're also quite upfront about our service uptime. So in this dashboard, you can see that exactly how well we're doing in hosting your service for you. There's actually a bug here where it's supposed to be 0.999, but it's only showing, it's rounding it down to 1 point at the moment. Yeah, it's just there so that we can kind of hold ourselves accountable and you can see exactly how well we're performing. And then almost last, and definitely not least, is our legal service management. I did a full video on this the other day, so you can see exactly how this is configured. So I'll click in here, and you can see our terms of services. And we have 3 versions here. One I did live yesterday. But this is the legal documents for the United States users. And we can specify exactly which clients this is for. So if you had a very simple game, had no real online components except for maybe you just wanted to check the entitlement and also maybe run some analytics on what the player is doing. You could have a very small terms of service or none at all even. But that's the only game that gets that. Or if you had something like a massively multiplayer online game like World of Warcraft, you're obviously doing a lot more with the player data. You want to make sure that player has agreed to not sell their account and not cheat and all sorts of stuff like that. So you can specify this legal document for this specific game as well. You can make these mandatory or optional. So the example of this would be you want people to agree to your terms of service, but whether they agree to having their data processed anonymously or not, you could have that be optional. That's up to you. We can go into our legal document here and see exactly what this says. So we know that it's version 1.0. It's currently active. When it was last updated and changed, the locale name, so in case this is English and English US, and of course in Markdown text, we can modify our legal agreement. But if I wanted to go in here and create a new version, I could give it I'm just going to say 2.0, and is it an important update? And if it is, people will get an email about it. We're going to say no, it's not, and we're going to create it. And if I click view, there's no new localized versions, so I can browse for a file, and I believe I have my binding legal document here. And I can say this is going to be the English version. You can upload a language for every different, or a version for every different language. And once it's uploaded, you can see that this is a binding legal document, and you can change exactly how this is presented to people by changing the markdown text. I might have that wrong, but you can also use our lovely WYSIWYG editor here. I'll get it right. There we go. So yeah, it's super useful for that kind of thing. We can then schedule a version to go live. So if I go back to our legal document here, I can say, okay, well, on June 1st, we're going to make version 2.0 live, and that'll be live. Players can get an update about it via email. When they log in, they'll be asked to agree. And that's kind of it for legal and document management that way. Do check out the video before if you're more interested in this. I do fully show the flow of logging a user in, registering and accepting all of this stuff, publishing a new one, and then what the user sees when that new one gets published. So it's quite useful. And then finally, for our final piece of the puzzle here on our being a publisher, selling your games on your own website, whether you're a big studio or a small one, we need a way to manage how our games are uploaded to the launcher and players play the games from the launcher. So in this case, I'm going to show off Light Fantastic. So Light Fantastic is a game we've made in-house just for showing off our feature set. Once I click play, the launcher minimizes and the game pops up, and we can log in and play the game. But I'm going to quit the game and go back to the launcher, and we're going to publish a new version of our game live. So I come down here to our build section and our apps. And if you've ever published a game on Steam or any other service, really, it's all quite similar how this is managed. So I jump into Light Fantastic for Windows, and I can see that this is the Windows 64 version. I can also see all the different versions of our game. So for instance, we have 1.0.5b here, and I'm pretty sure the version I'm on in our launcher is not that. So I'm going to say, okay, well, it's time to release our update. Set this one as the current. Are you sure you want to set it to current? Yes. That's now live. If I go to our game and check for update, we can see that we now have a new version, and I can, of course, click update to that version. It'll download a very small package of what the actual difference is between the version I have versus it. So you could have a 150 gigabyte game and make a small change. And instead of forcing your users to download the full 150 gigabyte version, you're only downloading a small asset pack that will then be applied on top of it. So very flexible, very easy, very manageable. And that's it. So that's kind of everything on the publisher side of things. There are ways to manage dedicated servers in real time, but I've been logged out, I believe. So our demo portal again. But that's generally it. So yeah, thank you for joining me in this particular video for covering how to become your own publisher with the AccelByte Storefront and Launcher. If you have any questions after the fact, once this is no longer live, please feel free to jump over to our website at accelbyte.io. Check out the services we offer in our solutions tab, or even just scroll down the page here and see if anything piques your interest. And if you're interested at all, just click on our little Ask Us Anything button here and give your details, and we will absolutely start a conversation and have an in-depth conversation about exactly how we can be of service to you and what you want to try and do with your particular game or games. You can also email us at hello@accelbyte.io, and we will get back to you as quickly as possible, and even try and arrange some sort of one-to-one conversation, again, specifically trying to cover what use cases you need. Yeah, thank you. I've been Shane, and I hope this video was informative and covering what you need, and we'll leave it there.